Folks, you're lucky enough to participate in something very unique when it comes to the brand new Raptor R, and that's because I have Andre on the line, not here in our studio, but confined from his home, and we're about to discuss the Raptor R.
Yeah, well, the Raptor R, dude, is a hot new truck. And you might be wondering, why are we not sitting together in the studio, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit sick. I'm sick, but it's not going to prevent me from, talking about this hot new truck because I was hands-on with it. We also have some other news in the truck world. So on this episode of TFL Talking Trucks, we'll cover all of that stuff.
That's right. And before we get started, we wanted to thank all of our Patreons out there. Thanks to you, we'll be able to treat Andre and hopefully get him well before SEMA, which is right around the corner. So Andre is required to get well, but thank you very much to our Patreon supporters. We appreciate it.
And I'm holding my Patreon app right here, now, and I could see that Don Megahan, Bill H, and Brandon Drake recently supported us on patreon.com/TFLcar, which is our only Patreon page. We've also been discussing a few things on Patreon community here, which is where you can ask us questions, comments, etc. And so really interesting conversation with Bill H about the different EcoBoost turbocharging and transmission configurations.
Okay. And dude, did you just tell me that Drake is supporting us? Yo?
Hold on, let me. So I tested positive for COVID, so maybe it's COVID speaking. Hold on. Drake. No, Brandon Drake. Drake is his last name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we can officially say that we're being supported by Drake. Oh, my kids are going to love it.
Yeah, I guess we could say that.
So thank you, Brandon, for your support too.
I think Mr. Drake supports us.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a start.
Yeah. So, dude, we wanted to do this show on the Raptor R truck because people and enthusiasts, actually, not just of the Ford brand of trucks, but I think in general, have really been waiting and seeing what is Ford going to do with their supercharged V8 powered Raptor.
Yeah, now let's back this up a little bit before we go right into it, which is initially when Ford came out with the Raptor, and we're talking nearly a decade ago in terms of early development and everything else, that had a couple V8 options, but they didn't have a supercharger on it, and it was a much heavier truck, a very different design. And then progressively, twin turbocharged V6, which a lot of people were really cold about because the engine sound, and we're going to be talking about that, and a few other things. So now we've moved into what really is the third generation, right, of the Raptor. And now we have a completely different setup with an engine that puts out, 700 horsepower?
Right. It's basically...
It's essentially a revamped version
of the Predator engine that was in the Ford Mustang, but they had to retool it and replumb it in order for it to work well with a pickup truck because completely different demands.
Yeah, you got it, dude. It's basically the GT500 Shelby Predator. They still call it the Predator V8, right? And in this supercharged, but it has been updated and changed slightly for truck duty. And that's very important because Ford and other companies, they have specific targets they have to hit, right, for their pickup trucks. So while the sports car engine may rev a little higher, may have really high horsepower numbers, but the torque is not as big, right? The torque may not be as beefy in a sports car. But in a truck, things have to be a little bit different, obviously, because that truck could be towing, right? It could be going off-road, it could be running dunes and going through mud. So that's what Ford did here. They changed the pulley, first of all. So the pulley on the supercharger is a little bit different, but it still has crazy numbers. And we'll talk about it because a lot of people want to compare it to the Ram TRX, right? Because that's a natural competitor.
Well, yeah.
And so the crazy numbers
And
are the 700 horsepower at 6,650 RPM. And we're talking about a pickup truck. That's a pretty
I mean,
high
that's
RPM.
screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we could talk about sound too, and exhaust note, right? Because we have actually a couple of videos already with exhaust note.
Well, I want to add to that. I believe that maximum torque, what is it, about 650 pound-feet of torque? And that comes in at like over 4,000 RPM, right?
Right. So the Raptor R torque is 640, and it's about 4,200 RPM approximately. So that's really kind of almost in the middle of its rev range. It's already making a maximum amount of torque, which is super, super good. And actually, the chief engineer, Carl Widman, I spoke with him recently at the first drive of the Raptor R truck, and he shared some extra tidbits on some of the powertrain. For example, the 10-speed automatic in the Raptor R had to be beefed up in order to, withstand that torque. And he said they took some clutches or some clutch systems from actually the bigger truck, the Super Duty, in order to manage this type of torque.
So we're already talking about a much beefier powertrain, but it also means, I mean, you have two extra cylinders. You have a completely different engine, actually, much larger displacement. So it's a larger engine, which means it's probably a heavier engine. So there's going to be extra beef for the suspension, right? In order to make sure that the truck has, a good cradle under it. All of that comes together with more weight. And that is really the big question, because if it weighs a lot more, then it may not be competitive with the TRX. But if it only weighs a little bit more, then it should be more than competitive. I mean, numbers, power to weight is a big deal.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, dude. I have my calculator here in front of me, which is my phone. I love my calculator. So
Yes. No.
So the Raptor R curb weight, and this is I saw a couple of these Raptor R trucks, and I checked their payload stickers. You know how I'm a stickler for that. And these trucks,
Right.
the Raptor Rs, have 1,460 pounds of approximate payload, and which means if you do the calculation, well, first of all, that's not a bad number already.
It's okay.
And what that means is the Raptor R weighs around 6,000 pounds at the curb, right? 6,000 pounds.
Okay.
So let's do the calculation. 6,000 pounds divided by 700 horsepower, and that is 8.57 pounds per horsepower. Okay. So that's under 9. So that's under 9 pounds of per horsepower. So
Okay.
if you use the race cars, of course, that doesn't sound like a lot.
No, but we're talking about a very large truck.
Now let's do a TRX calculation, okay?
Yeah.
The TRX has a much bigger displacement engine, 6.2 liter versus 5.2 liter in the Ford. And the TRX weighs a bit more. So at least our TRX, when we had it, weighed around 6,350 pounds. And it produces 702 horsepower. So that's 9.04.
It's really close, but it still is more. And, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people who will look at what the vehicle is on paper and point, oh, but see, it even has, better power to weight ratio. And I know that the interview that you had with Carl, and Carl's great, by the way, he worked on Mustangs. He talked about why the truck is the way it is and why they didn't push for more power. And I want you to elaborate on that, because I think it has to do with, its overall balance.
Yeah, and that's very important. Also, I want to do one more calculation before we talk about balance and some other aspects. Let's talk about
There's just calculating.
Hummer EV. Hummer EV,
Yeah.
at least ours with a spare tire, right? Spare tire accessory, weighs 9,400 pounds, and it produces 1,000 horsepower. Well, that's pretty simple. It's 9.4 pounds per horsepower. But that's still a little bit, worse than the TRX and the Raptor R. But, that's just on paper. We have to put them on a drag race together, and we will be, as soon as we can get a Raptor R to Colorado, you can be sure that we can drag race the TRX versus the Raptor R versus Hummer EV. What else should we bring? Maybe a Rivian?
Yeah, I think a Rivian would be a great addition. And did you already say Lightning? It'd be interesting to bring in the Lightning.
Yeah, just for
You know it's
comparison.
quick.
Yeah. And then there's of course other elements. So the Raptor R is riding on 37-inch tall tires, right?
Right.
And I asked Carl, the engineer, once again, and he basically said they really wanted extra clearances on this truck because they also have the regular Raptor on 35s, right? So why not just do that, right? But they said because there's so much more power and so much more torque in this V8 powered Raptor that extra inch of clearance, it could be a big deal, right? You're going over a jump, you're going faster, you kind of need that cushion, right, to actually really go through that terrain.
And now, I mean, we're talking about a 5-link rear suspension, 410 front and rear, I believe. So this is a really beefy kind of Baja setup truck, right? I mean, you buy it this way. It comes with all this stuff. And later on in this, I want to talk about pricing because that's a big deal. But bottom line, if you talk about the regular Raptor, even the Raptor 37, and then you look at this truck, this is obviously a step above and it has other components to prove it.
We're talking about not just tires, right? But you talked about balance, right? The balance of the truck. And actually, Carl did say this. They think the owners will try to do small jumps in this truck, right? We're not promoting, let's not jump the Grand Canyon here, right? But the attitude of the truck is important. If you put a giant engine with a lot of horsepower in the front, and then you're flying through the air and you're nose diving, that's not good for anybody, really.
Right.
So it was important for them to kind of try to balance it. It's not 50-50, but try to still balance that weight a little bit more and actually, try to get all that power to the ground. You mentioned 5-link rear suspension. Of course, now the TRX uses it, right? Ram trucks have had it on some other Ram models. And this is basically the truck maker getting rid of the leaves in the rear. They're keeping the solid rear axle, but they're using coil springs and also control arms just to locate the axle and make it as compliant and also as solid as possible.
Yeah, it really took a big push to get Ford to finally come out of the ether with leaf springs. And I have a feeling this is pretty much the way it's going to go for the remainder of their trucks. I think, well, we can guess about what they're going to do with their heavy duty trucks in the future, but Ram has done that with their heavy duty trucks. I believe that other than something, massive, almost everything they have now has coil springs front and rear.
Yeah, and actually I wanted to bring that up too. This is maybe a Raptor R episode, but we can talk about other news and other things happening in the world. A week ago, or actually over a week ago, I was in California with the Ram heavy duty guys. So this was Ram HD Rebel event. And I spoke to one of the people on the Ram team, and they said, I asked, why not 3500 Ram heavy duty Rebel? Why is the heavy duty Rebel only confined or only available on the 2500 series? And they told me that the 2500 series, first of all, the Power Wagon is on the same chassis, but it's using coil springs, right, on the heavy duty line. But the 1-tons, the big dualies on Ram still use leaves.
Those gigantic leaves, yeah.
Yeah, so in order for them to make a heavy duty 1-ton truck Rebel, off-road truck, they would have to redesign the leaves, right? So because they want a little bit more compliance, right, for off-roading and balance it with payload and towing. So that was going to be a big task. And so they decided not to go there quite yet. Maybe they will in the future. We don't know. Ram did not say. But that's really interesting because the truck world is moving. Of course, electrification is also here, but also electric trucks, as we've seen with the Hummer and the Lightning, and of course the Rivian, they're going to independent rear suspension.
Right, and that kind of brings me to the next part of this, which is going back to the Raptor R. A lot of the tech is kind of on the old side, right? There is a Ford F-150 that has a hybrid, which is already out. Someone I know happens to own one. And why not make this a hybrid where you already have, the guaranteed power, you already know what you're doing with this power, and you can up it. I mean, essentially a larger electric motor, perhaps a slightly larger battery, and you'd be there, right, in terms of power? So I'm curious, did you talk to them about essentially a Raptor R hybrid or something like that?
Unfortunately, I didn't get some of those future-looking questions answered, partly because, as you know,
They're not
no
going to
comment.
answer it anyway.
No comment usually,
Yeah.
because this is kind of a future product. But let me speculate just a second. Remember, actually 2 years ago, maybe you and I were, or I was speculating on this show. And on this show, I was talking about that the next Raptor will be hybrid or partially electrified. And of course, my prediction did not come true.
Right.
But that's not to say,
I remember you talking about that.
but that's not to say that it's not going to happen 2 years from now, right? Because right now, I think it's still the golden age of the V8. Just look at the TRX, look at now the Raptor R. They're going head to head. Cadillac V, right? That's General Motors. Dude, by the way, Cadillac V, the sound that thing makes is insane.
Yeah, I would say that it's one of the best, or well, actually not best, it's one of the angriest sounding trucks that I have been near, much less driven, in the past 10 years. It's an angry, angry, pissed off vehicle, which I love. I'm curious because I haven't heard it up in person if the Raptor R competes in terms of engine note. And I think you can talk at least about their exhaust system.
Yeah, we can. And also we have video out there of us revving the truck while it's sitting still. So we could kind of listen to it. But of course, the Raptor R has multiple exhaust modes. So they do have that. So remember on the 3rd gen Raptor, when it came out 2 years ago, they had that loop-to-loop where it was, they called it the trombone loop, where they're trying to make equal length exhaust system. Of course, the Raptor R got
So
rid
at
of
the near the very
I'm sorry, at the very end of it, it wraps around and then comes back, and that makes it equal length, even though it does create more curves for the exhaust flow. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yes, and so the Raptor R, of course, got rid of the exhaust loop-to-loop, I call it, and then they added actually several resonators, and they still have a very large muffler. Can you hear my dog, by the way? Okay.
Oh, yes, I can.
This is a huge bonus for all of you people who are tuning in. And the reason why is because for all the years I've known Andre, which has been nearly 10 years now, he's always been very adverse to owning a dog. And now he owns it. He's always been a cat guy, whatever. But now he has a dog and he loves the dog. And the dog, the one time he has to do a broadcast from home, is letting us know that it exists, which I think is precious. I'm sorry. Continue. This is great.
His name is Jack. He's almost 9 months old. So we got him as a puppy, and he's a little guy. He's about like 18 pounds. So he's not going to get much bigger, but yeah, I'm becoming a huge dog person. And I've been a cat owner for a long time, but it wasn't, really because I made a decision to. It's because I always lived in bigger cities, and dogs in big cities don't really intersect very well.
Well, nonetheless, your family demanded a dog and you finally acquiesced, and now a dog is there. And I think it's great. For those of you who are listening and watching, Andre has become a better person because of this.
So speaking of sound, we were talking about exhaust.
Exactly, which is why your dog started talking.
Yeah. So he said, "What about me? Can I say something?" So they still have this pretty large muffler on the Raptor R, and it has 2 inlets. So the 2 inlets coming from the front, from the engine, and it has 3 outlets. So it's still a pretty fancy muffler. And the top 2 outlets have valves, right, that are controlled electrically. And that's how you control the sound, right? So you can partially open them or fully open them or close them to get different sound from the exhaust. And then the third outlet down below, they told me it's really like the quietest mode, right? So if you close the valves on top, you can still have exhaust coming out. Obviously, it has to, right? But it'll be the quietest type of exhaust.
Wonder if it works similar to the way Corvette's active exhaust works, where there's baffles, and essentially, if you're going into performance mode, it automatically opens them up, I believe. And I think it might be the same on the Raptor, where it's just going to open everything up when you want to go high performance.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen this on the regular EcoBoost, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, the regular EcoBoost Raptor, I should say.
Right, yeah.
You have to specify this very precisely.
Yes.
Where at highway mode, you can there's 4 settings on the exhaust system. You could go to quiet, and really, it also has like sound cancellation, right? So the speakers inside the truck actually try to cancel some frequencies like road noise or maybe wind noise from the truck outside, and becomes ultra quiet. And I heard one of the Ford engineers describe it as the conference call mode. So you're in your Raptor and you're in a conference call with somebody and you wanted that quiet interior, and you can do that. Then you put it in Baja mode. They call it off-road only, by the way. So Baja mode, quote unquote, is off-road only. So assuming you're in the dirt, you're outside somewhere in the national parks or wherever you're off-roading, and you could kind of let it breathe and open up the sound a little bit more. So and it becomes loud, even in the regular Raptor.
So here's a big question, and I think a lot of people are curious about this, Andre. Is there augmented noise as well?
So I don't know that for sure. I didn't get to on the Raptor R specifically.
Yeah.
I believe on the regular Raptors, there's still some augmentation of the exhaust sound. On the Raptor R, and at least from what I can say, walking around the truck, hearing it idle, right? And revving it when it's stationary. I don't think that V8 requires augmentation. So it's actually this is what the enthusiasts have been asking for, right?
Yes.
And I think you're getting it. There's a huge caveat, and I received a lot of emails and messages about this, and I think somebody on Patreon also asked this. It's the price, right? And that's a big but, because we can be excited by this truck. Like I said, we're going to be drag racing it hopefully in the near future. We'll take it, we'll show you how it behaves off-road, how the engine behaves when you actually put it under load. But the price. So it starts at 109,000.
Yeah, but we actually talked about this on TFL Off-Road on the post that just went up. The whole thing about that is you get a lot of standard features with the Raptor R. And I'm not making an apology for that price. It's ridiculous and painful. But when you're comparing it to the TRX, you'll find that the TRX starts out much, much less for their base price TRX. However, and this is, Andre, this is me guessing, but it seems like if you take a TRX and give it all the features that come standard with the Raptor R, then you're much closer in price. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely, dude. So right now, the Ram TRX starts for 2023 model year. I believe it's like around 82. Okay. So, and then, well, you compare it 82 to 109, that's a huge gap.
Well,
right?
yeah, that's $27,000.
Yeah. But, like you said, when you add options, the nice leather and the bigger, and, heads up display, camera mirrors, other features to the TRX, it's becoming like a mid $90s $1,000 truck. So now we're talking 94, 95, 96,000, still not quite over 100K.
You're within a striking distance, so to speak. A $5,000 gap as opposed to a $27,000 gap, major difference. And I think that a lot of Ram fans are going to say, but yeah, still, I can still get the Ram with 702 horsepower and more torque coming out of this truck for a lot less money if I get the standard model and just not deal with the really high-end goodies that the Raptor R has. And I think that Ford's coming at it as standard. You're getting all of this equipment, a 10-speed augmented, beefed up, I should say, transmission with all of this extra stuff. So, the price suddenly makes a little bit more sense, but it's still noticeably more expensive than a TRX.
Yeah, and that's really fair. That's fair to say. It
Yeah,
is more expensive. And unfortunately, and once again, I don't like to spend a lot of time on this because it's another topic. It's a
right.
kind of a tangent, but dealer markups.
Oh,
Um,
Lord have mercy.
it's a tangent, and some Ram dealers have done this, some Ford dealers have done this, and other vehicles like the Bronco Raptor sees a lot of markup already. Some of the Jeep 392, for example, a V8 powered Jeep Wrangler, also sees markups. So it's happening all over the place, but we can't talk about that because it's hard to compare.
It's not fair to compare really because it just depends on the dealership and how greedy they are being and some certain other things I know people will debate. That's a totally different conversation. But I wanted to go back onto a technical point that I just remembered about the Raptor R, and I wanted to get your take on it. Now, there is no longer a torsion front diff, right? It's something different, and I wanted you to explain it and explain, at least in your opinion, why.
So that's quite interesting. As you know, Nathan and I mean, we off-roaded over the years,
Yep.
many different trucks, and we compared, and we've done truck of the year competitions, and I think you would agree with me, Nathan, that ultimately articulation and lockers and traction is where it's at, right?
Absolutely.
And especially for slower off-roading. I'm not talking about jumping dunes. I'm
Right.
talking about Rocky Mountain trail, slow going on around the rocks.
Like our cliffhanger 2.0 is a really good example of having to go up and over rocks and taking your time and using your torque and hopefully having lockers to get you through it.
Yeah, and also our Onyx off-road trail at Tumbleweed, right?
Yes.
Kind of the same thing. Really slow going. You're crossing these kind of old creek beds, and there's a lot of articulation, and it's muddy, and you
Right.
really have to have a lot of traction. So that's to preface this conversation. Then you need tires as well. So both the TRX and the Raptor R have really good tires, in my opinion. The
Right.
TRX has the Territory tires by Goodyear. Raptor R has BF Goodrich KO2s. Both tires, in my opinion, are very, very good.
I would
And then
agree.
you need traction at each wheel. And Raptor has had an optional torsion front limited slip differential. It's a mechanical device. It doesn't have a switch. It works automatically, right? But it's actually a physical device that if it senses one wheel spinning at a greater rate than the other, it will try to lock up and transfer the power so both tires can grip.
It's similar in function to like a G80 or something like that, where there's some slip and then boom, it kicks in, right?
Yeah, totally. Slightly different gearing as far as internals, right?
Right.
But the same concept, right?
Right.
So I was talking to Carl, and he said, "Oh, Raptor no longer has a torsion front end." That was a big surprise to me,
Right.
at least. And he said basically Raptor R is now using brake distribution, which is basically the same tool that the TRX have been using. And brake distribution is basically the computer saying, this wheel is spinning in the front, let's send a brake, let's slow that wheel down, and then maybe the other wheel will take over, right? So it's basically using the brake system to help the vehicle get through a tough spot, a tough
I
situation.
know.
Yeah, which it's interesting because this is essentially the trick that a lot of automakers use on all-wheel drive crossovers and, I would hate to say it this way, but lesser off-roaders, because instead of having mechanical lockers, you suddenly are using the brakes and pinching the brakes in order to prevent spin and then to get them to do what they have to do to get you over the obstacle. Now, we know it's effective to a certain degree, but the real question is, Why did they do it? And I don't think Ford has a solid answer for that. Could it be weight saving? Could it be money saving? Or could it be that maybe that much power being sent to the torsion is just too much for it? Do we have any indication on what it might be?
No, well, Carl, when we're addressing this topic, Carl said we decided we didn't need it. So um, that's one, of course, one take at this question. But also,
Sure.
and we can speculate, you and I, but I don't think we'll know exactly what it will be ultimately. But my guess is he talked about also beefing up the front differential. It is an independent system, but they beefed it up. They gave it a new cover, right? Probably, I don't know what's happening inside of that, but it has to take a lot of horsepower and torque. So now, because you're now increasing that from 450 to horsepower to 700 horsepower, so you're jumping up in power.
Yeah, you're nearly doubling it, and the extra torque and everything else. It's a lot of strain on all systems, which is why earlier you mentioned the fact that the 10-speed has been beefed up by using clutch components out of the 10-speed that's used on the heavy-duty trucks. So it makes sense that that would be one of the reasons why, but we don't have an official answer. It sounds like.
Yeah, that's true. And you talked in the beginning. We talked about weight, right? And
Yeah.
how heavy or light these trucks are. And of course, Ford decided to go to aluminum bodies and beds back in 2015
Right.
model year. And I think it's still paying off for them, right? That decision that they made long ago, and they continued that through the generations of the F-150. And now, of course, the Raptor. Their truck, like I said, 6,000 pounds at the curb. I think it is important for off-roading, for acceleration, for other things. We still don't have EPA numbers. So if you're wondering, okay, is this going to guzzle fuel, under 10 mpg? We don't know yet.
I guarantee you it won't be as good as the regular Raptor. I mean, that makes sense. Larger tires, more weight. What's the weight gain on this officially?
Over the regular Raptor?
Right.
So actually not a huge one. So I have to be careful here. So I think they said the engine weighs about 100 pounds more than the V6 because
Mhm.
you also have the supercharger case, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And then other components. So there's almost 100 pounds difference. But there's a big but here. The Raptor R is fully optioned. You can get kind of a more basic regular Raptor without, some of the additional luxury components,
Sure.
including the fancy Recaro seats, ventilated and cooled, right? Heated steering wheel. So if you subtract some of the luxury features on the regular Raptor, that weight comes down a little bit more.
So I thought there was a number being thrown around either 210 or 250 in terms of some of the weight gain. Is that just me reading wrong into the notes, or?
No, I think maybe what you were referring to there is like a base regular V6 Raptor versus Raptor R.
Got it.
Because like I said, Raptor R does have a few more options. So I think that kind of makes sense. But it wasn't like they gained 500 pounds.
No, it's not. I mean, essentially, that's like one typical American like me, being added to the vehicle. And the other part of it is because you have a heavier, torquier powertrain, you probably want a beefed up suspension. That's going to add a little bit of weight as well. So there's other, contributing factors to a little bit of weight gain. But when you're thinking about a truck that weighs, in the 6,000 pound range, 250 pounds, while that is, a little bit, it's not a lot. And I think that that's a big deal for a lot of people out there who are going to take this truck and inevitably are going to go to Glamis and they're going to find a TRX and they're going to try to hunt them down and go over the dunes. And we're going to see this on video. Hopefully we get to do it. But the point is that that is where everything, becomes clear. Did Ford do their research enough to beat the TRX when it comes to actual drivability? Unfortunately, you're not able to answer that right now.
Yeah, and that's coming very soon. So
Right.
don't worry about that, guys.
Oh, I won't worry about it.
Yeah, and also what we don't know is people are saying the Raptor R is going to have limited production. And I don't have a number, and I don't think that number will be communicated or is communicated. It could be I could take a guess, but I could be wrong, so I don't want to say anything. But I do know a lot of customers have been still waiting for the regular Raptor orders, right? Now there's a Raptor R. A lot of them may be switching, or want an option to switch and say, I've been waiting, help me out here, right? Get me something else. So there's multiple things going on there. Ram said basically, I believe about a year or two ago about the TRX, they made a statement that we'll sell as many as we can, as there's demand. So I thought that was pretty a bold statement. And I see a lot of TRXs out there.
Man, I'm seeing a ton of them out, and it's to a point where I've seen, at least in my neighborhood, as many TRXs as I've seen the new Raptors. And usually Ford's production numbers, are much higher than Ram's, but at least in from my perspective, they're selling the hell out of the TRX.
Yeah, and that just shows that there's still appetite for this type of truck, right, in the market. Even though, of course, a lot of us will never be able to afford personally one of these machines.
Yeah.
There's still demand out there, and I think it's driving competition. So it's helping us because what they learned with the Raptor R, hopefully trickles down to regular F-150s, right? And we can gain some benefit from that in the coming years. And so, but we still don't know, like you said, about electrification. Is there going to be like a Lightning Raptor? We don't know. We don't know if it's it's going to be a hybrid of some sort. I think Jack is talking.
Well, I think Jack is trying to tell you, yes, I agree. And also, Jack, I think, is saying, hey, owner, that's you, we should also talk about some other news other than the Ford, because there are a couple other things out there, and perhaps it's time to talk about them. Specifically, we were talking about Ram, so why not talk about the Ram electrified pickup truck?
I think Ram is way smarter than I am. I mean, Jack.
That's cool. Maybe both are. I don't know. I'm going to blame the COVID on that one.
Yeah, I'm going to call my COVID card, pull out my COVID card. So there was recently a prototype out in public that a spy photographer captured, and it looked like a standard Ram 1500. But then closer inspection of this prototype shows that it has independent rear suspension, not a solid axle. So there's some information out there now that this might be the first Revolution or EV-powered, electric-powered Ram truck.
It's official. They are going to call it the Revolution. That's official.
Yeah, Ram Revolution, which is kind of a clever, and also it has EV in the Revolution.
Exactly, and that's, I think, why they chose it, and I'm sure they paid millions to find that name and find a reason behind it. So a couple of things about the Revolution. Unlike both the Ford Lightning and the upcoming Chevy Silverado EV and the Hummer and the Rivian, they are talking about a range extender as being a possible option. Has that been confirmed? Do you know anything about that?
Well, I think Ram went on record about it, and they said, well, first of all, they said, we're going to have the best specs. They didn't say, what specs are going to be the best, but they said it's going to be segment-defining Revolution truck. We don't know exactly what that means yet. And then they did mention the range extension option and up to 500 miles potentially of driving range, which might be possible. So basically using a small internal combustion engine to provide additional electricity to the battery, right?
Right. Kind of like the car you currently own, just on a lot larger scale.
Yeah, my wife drives a BMW i3 Rex range extender. So she loves it because her commute is up to about 50 miles a day. And the car is rated and can do about 75 miles a day. And my wife is pretty happy because once in a while she does a bigger journey, and she can use that range extender to get her another 30, 40, 50 miles. And then she comes home and charges at home. So it could be a viable solution. Of course, it's a more expensive solution. Obviously, you're adding components to your vehicle. So we don't know how that's going to play out. But it looks like Ram is really coming along with this. And also they said at CES, this is in January, which is a consumer electronics show
Right.
The Revolution will be fully displayed, so they're gonna show it at CES, and it's not gonna be in Los Angeles. So
That's surprising.
I was a little so at first I was under the impression that the Revolution truck is coming to LA in November. You're gonna be there, right?
Yep.
Los Angeles Auto Show is November 17th approximately for media.
Yep.
But no, I was wrong. The Revolution is coming to CES. So that's going to be in January. So we'll have to wait a little bit longer to check that out.
Well, if I recall, the last time Stellantis did something big in terms of showing off their upcoming merchandise, that was also at CES last year. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, they had like an electric car concept, right?
Yeah, they had the Airflow, the Chrysler Airflow on display, and they had some other vehicles kind of all under one roof. And it was for them, it was a pretty big display and a pretty big setup. And they made a lot of announcements there. So this might be kind of bookending that and showing, hey, a year ago we said this, here's the truck we were talking about. So that makes sense. But between now and then, we have SEMA, pretty big show to do an unveiling at. And then, of course, the LA Auto Show. And the LA Auto Show, usually going back to FCA and Chrysler Stellantis, they like to do a big reveal there. So I'm kind of surprised that they're not doing it at the LA show, to be honest with you.
And we'll have to wait and see. Maybe something else is coming out. And at SEMA, Ram is showing another version of a modified TRX. They teased it. And then Jeep is showing, I believe, some sort of electrified concept. Maybe it basically looks like a classic Jeep, not the what's the name?
Magneto.
Yeah. Not a Magneto concept, but something else. Maybe aftermarket parts like motors and batteries that SEMA companies can use to modify their vehicles with. So something like that.
Yeah, I had an idea for Mopar, Stellantis's branch for performance components, which is inevitably they have to change because everybody's electrifying. So I thought that they should do a crate electric motor in the future that has 1,000 horsepower, just like the Elephant, but they call it the Elephant. Get it with the E? Oh, yeah. This is why I don't work for automakers or PR because it's a bad idea. But I like the E part because apparently everybody's going to throw EV in everything they do now, and we're stuck with it. Anyway, I wanted to. I appreciate. Yeah, thank you for backing me up on that.
It's going to be the big elephant in the room, I think, eventually.
You did that. Look at you. Yeah.
One more thing. So before
Yes.
we wrap up, there's another piece of news that's coming out is the 2023 Ford Super Duty order books are supposed to be opening soon. There is actually a leaked dealership order guide that's been circulating for a few days out there on the interwebs.
Is that on the truck website now?
Not yet. It will be soon.
Okay.
Because I want to confirm this, right? I don't want to publish this leaked document and just basically say Ford said this.
Oh, I was wrong. Right.
They haven't published any horsepower numbers for the Super Duty. I know a lot of you have been asking this.
Yeah.
No torque numbers, no horsepower numbers for the new motors for that truck. And also, there's one element of that document that said the Ford F-450 2023 Super Duty will have a 40,000 pound towing package. So right now, the war of dually trucks, right? I believe it's between Ram and Ford. They're both around 37,000 pounds for dually towing. Now Ford says we're gonna have 40. Once again, unofficially. But still, stay tuned to this space because I think, and we'll be testing all the heavy duty trucks very soon. But stay tuned to this space because this is going to be exciting.
40,000 pounds. If that is true, think about how far they've jumped in just 10 years. It's insane.
It's basically more than half than a semi-truck.
Yeah.
Right? Because semi-trucks usually are rated at 80,000 gross weight, right?
Right.
So that's almost approaching a semi-truck capability in a small truck. So yeah, it's getting nuts. Really getting nuts.
Well, what we have to make sure this is confirmed before we can put this out there. But at the very least, the rumor is out there. So now everybody who's watching this, now you know, or now you might know. So Andre, in the near future, we have SEMA, we have the LA Auto Show, and I know this is a truck show, but I also wanted to promote something because this is going to be painful and hurtful and difficult and probably very smelly. It's the D2D event that's going to be Roman and I and Cole, our cameraman, driving cross country in an all-electric vehicle, that being a Hyundai Ioniq 5. And we're going to try to do it as non-stoppy as we can. So we're going to stop. We're not going to go to a hotel. We're not going to go to restaurants. We're going to stay in the car. And the only time we're hopping out is to charge it along the way. We're going to use Electrify America along the way. We're going from Anaheim, Disneyland, all the way over to Orlando, Walt Disney World, in less than 48 hours.
Yes. So people, stay tuned for this. This is going to be huge. When you and Roman told me about this, well, I knew about the D2D concept, Disney to Disney concept. But when you guys told me you're going to cannonball it, and I'm using quotes because you're charging, obviously, also.
Right.
And that could take some time. And also, hopefully during charging, you may be taking a cat nap or using the restroom or eating. I don't want you to be hurt. Please stay safe. Please be safe. But it's going to be incredible. I think the Ioniq 5 is a quick charging car.
It's one of the quickest. I think next to the Hummer and maybe one other vehicle, it's one of the fastest.
Yeah. So I'm going to be watching you guys from either my my home office if I'm still sick, or hopefully from SEMA. I'll be watching every second and to see how you guys are doing.
Oh, I guarantee you're going to be hearing from us regardless. I mean, Roman calls you every 8 seconds as it is. By the way, this is for charity, so it's going to a children's hospital. Hyundai is going to, for every mile we cover, actually it's the other way around. We're going to, with Hyundai, have for $1 for every mile covered, and then give the children's hospital a check when we're done with this. So it's around 2,500 miles, give or take. But here's the other thing, and just to keep this in mind, it's going to be between 16 and 18 stops for electricity and cross country. So once again, we're trying to do it in less than 48 hours. So it's going to be tight. It would be worth a watch.
And I want to plug a couple more things.
Sure.
Okay, that's related to this. TFL EV, like you mentioned, are one of our newer, fast-growing channels. We're going to have ChargeZilla series launching very, very soon in a few days.
Right.
This is our electrified 1965 Ford. Now we call it E100. It was F-100 pickup truck that we electrified with Legacy EV, 101 motors, and Fox shocks. It's going to be at SEMA. So if you are near SEMA, around SEMA, stay tuned for that because the truck is going to be there. And we'll have more news to share. First episode will drop this weekend when you're listening to this episode of TFL Talking Trucks. And also our friends at Elevation Off Grid. This is a Denver, Colorado-based company who does Ford F-150s, giant trucks on liquid spring suspension on 42s. We also have a video coming for that. But the guys from Elevation Off Grid are also going to be at SEMA unveiling an entire new truck. I cannot tell you what it is, but you gotta wait for it.
Well, stay tuned for that. And by the way, if you guys are at SEMA, look for us. Almost the entire team, at least the old guard of the team, is going to be there. So hopefully, Andre, we'll see how he's feeling in the next couple days. But I'll be there, and Roman will be there as well. I don't think Tommy will be there.
But I think you'll see Cole. Well, Cole is our camera guy.
Cole is our camera guy, but yeah, he's one dashing devil. He's probably going to be editing this anyway, so yeah. And I think maybe one other person. But anyway, the point is that you will see some TFL guys running around there, so give us a shout out if you see us, if you're at the show. And stay tuned. We have a lot of stuff coming in the very near future.
All right, well, there you have it. Another show in the book. Let us know your comments, of course, below. We read all your comments. Support us on patreon.com/TFLcar. And let us know what you think about this whole Raptor R versus TRX versus others competition.
All right, guys. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
See ya.